you go, Ethan.
Where are you starting?
Right now.
So can you tell me a little bit about what your character and what your name is?
Yeah, my name is Mike Caldwell, and I played the part of Sergeant Patrick Cass, who was an Irish carpenter who was drafted onto the Lewis and Clark military expedition back in 1803.
I'm doing a report on the character George Shannon. It's actually Red Song. Do you know a little bit about the character?
I do.
You mind telling us a little bit about it?
About George Shannon. He was the youngest member of the expedition, about 17 when he signed on. Quite a bit written about him. A local author here named Lauren Taylor has written a complete book of Shannon. Quite interesting. And he was a very willing and hard-working member of the crew and was well-liked. Got into trouble a couple times because he's a young guy, but he was generally well thought of, and a whole book's been written about him, so I can't say much more than that.
Can you tell me what I'm looking at around here? Pretty.
Sure. This is a campsite where Lewis and Clark camped for 4 days in 1804. It's quite historic. A number of things happened here. They stopped here to repair one of their pirogues. They had 3 boats, and two of them were called pirogues, and they were just enlarged canoes. They were about 40 feet long. And the big keel boat was 55 feet long, and those 3 vessels carried most of the men and equipment, guns, whatever they needed, all the way up the Missouri River, approximately 4,000 miles out to the west coast. And they didn't go the entire way in those boats, but they did go a pretty good portion of it by river. And mainly they were trying to explore the Louisiana Purchase and bring back samples of plants and animals and information about the tribes that lived out here and all the people that lived out here, because there were a lot of myths about the Louisiana Purchase area. But anyway, they stopped here for 4 days, camped out. One of the things that happened here was repairing the pirogue. Another thing happened, they had a court-martial here. 2 of the men that were on duty at night got into the whiskey barrel and drank whiskey and got drunk, and they were then were charged with being drunk on duty, which meant that could have endangered the expedition. So they were house arrested, and then they were tried by the other enlisted men, not by Lewis and Clark or even the sergeants, but by the other enlisted men, and those enlisted men then recommended a punishment of, it was a corporal crime, that's what it was. What that means is punishable by death. But rather than punish them by death, they took the second alternative, that was to lash them. So they lashed them with 100 lashes on their bare back with a cat o' nine tails. Very severe punishment. And one guy got 50 lashes because he was kind of brought into it and didn't actually perpetrate the crime. But in any case, they did not get out of work. They had to go right back to work after that. So it was pretty tough times. And that all happened right here. They were here for 4 days. At the end of the court-martial, these 2 men got on the boat and they had to row. And they went right on upstream. So by the time they got on upstream to Omaha, there were no more infractions. The men were beginning to get the picture that these captains were deadly serious about this mission, and really it's quite a harmonious crew and a brotherhood of men by the time they got that far. And of course they went on. Omaha was not there. Kansas City was not there. None of these towns were there. St. Louis was. But after St. Louis, that was the farthest west of any town. Now, any white town. But when they got farther out, they found some very sophisticated Indian villages, particularly one called Mandan, and they stayed. That's where they picked up Sacagawea and her baby and her husband. And they were multilingual, and so they traveled with Lewis and Clark, and Lewis and Clark paid them to go along with the expedition so that they could help interpret whenever they ran into Indians. Charbonneau, the husband of Sacagawea, could speak like 8 languages. And their son, who later grew up, could speak like 15 languages. So in those days, there were so many different tribes, it was an invaluable skill to have to be able to interpret so that the traders could actually trade with them. So, anyway, so what you're seeing here, to answer your question, is 51 stones representing the 51 members of the expedition. I don't say men of the expedition because Sacagawea wasn't here, and there's one other individual that was not a man. It was Seaman the dog. And Seaman here is engraved on that stone, and he was an invaluable member of the expedition, often helped in finding game, and he actually retrieved like 100 squirrels out of the river one time and fed the men of the expedition. So anyway, these 51 people, let's see, 13 of those were temporary, what they called engagees. They were French Indian descent, and I've got those listed on the back 13 stones. All the remaining stones up here were people that were actually enlisted and had rank in, they were either a captain or a sergeant or a corporal or, for the most part, privates. And so we've engraved the names of all of those people from the journals, set up just the way they assembled every morning. They assembled just the way you see them here. They always assembled with the cadre in front and with the sergeants to the left, and all the men lined up in a line, all the men in each platoon or each squad or each, they called it a mess. They call it a mess because that's what they called their dinner, and they all ate together.
That's neat.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
I'm going to add one question there for you, boss. Just look, you mentioned before we started that there's a stone over there, and can you tell me a little bit more about that stone over there?
Yeah, my friend John here, I think, spotted that stone, told me about it, and he said, kind of a mystical stone, you might want to keep your eye on it. So I kept looking at it, and didn't know what I was going to do with it. It was about a 2-ton boulder, and it was 8 feet long, and it was laying down underneath some other boulders, so it was hard to see anything in it, but it kept intriguing me. So I took the bobcat and cleared away all the other stones one day and pulled that stone out and laid it down on the grass, looked at it 14 different ways. Finally, I just laid down next to it, and it looked like the outline of a woman carrying a baby. And I thought, my gosh, Sacagawea. We found a stone out that was dug out of Wyandotte County here, about 15 miles west. John actually dug it out and loaded it up, and along with 3,800 lineal feet of 2-ton boulders that you see up behind you. And we brought it out and decided that would be a good place for it. We didn't put her right with the crew because she was not here. So it thought that it would be good to have her represented as a spiritual entity here. So we placed the stone upright. It's slightly reddish in color, Indian, and it's has a shape like a woman carrying a baby. So we set it upright. And the interesting thing about it is that when the sun goes down at night, it halos the statue. So it gives
cool.
another spiritual feeling about it.
That's neat.
The park here is, the river here is largely different than what it was in those days. It was more like a wetland, a lot of islands, a lot of sawyers, or what they call stobs and things sticking up out of the river. Much rougher and more shallow and slower moving. Now it's much faster, more narrow, and fewer sandbars.
And you built this park, right?
Yeah, we had a whole group that got together to conceive the idea of getting this park ready for the bicentennial, and knowing it was a historic site, and the local historians really wanted to see it turned into a Lewiston Park Park. So we all worked together, got it started, got some engineering plans put together to do the kiosk up here and some other things, and then they asked me to come on and build a boat ramp, which I did down here, got it built at no cost, and then I stayed on to work on the park. I fell in love with the park, and then I started putting my ideas into it. Then I ended up going on the expedition with the men out to the West Coast and began to learn the intricacies of the Lewis and Clark expedition firsthand, and played the part of Sergeant Patrick Gass, which is this character here. He was an Irish carpenter and had been a sergeant, but we got recruited, but they already had enough sergeants, so he took on the role of private until they got up. They're up in Nebraska, and his sergeant, actually the one I'm sitting on here, Sergeant Floyd, actually died. And so the crew elected Gass to replace him. That's the way they used to do the promotions in those days. So he was elected, and every year they have a Gass family reunion up there in Nebraska, and about 400 people
Wow.
So it's a huge, huge expanded family. He lived to age 99. My dad right now is 103, so I've got longevity in my family. So I'm a carpenter by hobby. I'm a Irishman by genes, and I'm what's the other thing I want to say? Anyway, so that's it.
Wow. Thank you so much for doing this. One last question, we'll shut this off. I noticed over there, that bank right there, I can't zoom in real good right now, but were you part of that as well? That Lewis and Clark
statue?
The statue?
Yeah, a statue was given to us by the Corps of Engineers had it for the bicentennial from 2003 to 2006, and it was at Lake Pomona, and they called us and wanted to know if we wanted it, and we said, sure, we'll take it. It was a 8-foot-high, 600-pound steel statue, and we didn't quite know what we were going to do about it, but the more I thought about it, this park is not very well marked from the river. In other words, if you're on the river in some kind of vehicle, this looks like just another piece of land.
Right.
So we decided to put it out in the middle, and that wouldn't have been the first option for many people, because they would have thought, gee, it'll get washed away in the next high water event.
Right.
But we put it up in such a way that it's flat and it's facing upstream, so that the river wouldn't push it over or tear it up. And it's mounted into about a 3-ton boulder, so I don't think it's going to go anywhere.
Any significance to it where it's placed?
Other than it does, so few of these Lewis and Clark signs, if you noticed, ever point the right way.
Right.
So we're just made all one way, so they just got to put them up. This is pointing the right way. It's pointing the direction that they went, upstream, north.
I gotcha.
So that's significant, and the other part of it is that it marks the park as a Lewis and Clark park.
That's not where they sandbarred, is it?
What?
That's not where they hit the sandbar, is it? Right there?
No, is that a sandbar?
No, is that where they got stuck?
Big Muddy.
A Big Muddy?
Big Muddy.
Big Muddy?
Well, they got stuck on sandbars quite often.
Okay.
It happened a lot because, number one, the river is so muddy you can't see a sandbar 4 inches under the water, so you could run up on one. And you run a 10-ton boat up on a sandbar, you've got some work to do
right.
to get it back off.
Okay.
Particularly when you're coming downstream.
Yeah.
Going upstream wasn't quite as big a problem. They moved the boats upstream against this current in a number of ways. One choice was to sail it whenever they happened to have a tailwind. The other choice was to row it, which was quite difficult, but they did it. The other choice was to cordel it, which is a French term meaning to take a hold of the cord and pull it. And 5 or 6 men would pull it along the bank. And the other choice would have been to pole it, with poles in the bottom and push. So they were lucky if they could make 15 miles a day going upstream. And keep in mind they went 4,000 miles.
Yeah.
It's an incredible story, really.
Yeah.
Because how long did it take? And it took them about 1.5 years to get out to the West Coast.
Wow.
And it took a lot of guts, a lot of hard work, a lot of exhaustion, and they had to pull those boats barefoot most of the time because you couldn't wear moccasins or shoes or anything.
Yeah.
It would just be sucked right off by the mud.
Yeah.
So, the thing about it is, it's a true story.
Yeah.
People don't think about that. It's a true story, and it was a lot different for them because, unlike the astronauts who went to the moon, we could still talk to them. When they left Washington and St. Louis, they were out of communication.
Yeah.
Nobody could talk to them. They had to make all the decisions on their own.
Wow.
And, they were completely out. And, of course, when they came back, they were heroes. And they were all given big hunks of land. My character, Sergeant Patrick Gass, would have been considered wealthy because he was given a lot of land in Missouri, which some of it's still in the family.
Well, really neat story about Lewis and Clark. Thank you for
You're
talking
welcome.
a little bit about it.
Yeah, thanks for coming by the park. Back again. Are you all from this area? Or?